We already know that our nervous system uses electrical signals. But how does our body produce those electricity? Right now, let's talk about how. This is a neuron, a single cell. And I make this axon fat because I want you to look at the details. Inside and outside of the neuron, you see these charged ions. We have sodium and potassium. They both carry one positive charge. And you will see there are more sodium ions outside than potassium inside. When you have an electrical signal coming to this neuron, it increases the voltage inside of the cell. When the voltage increases to about minus 55 millivolts, it opens the sodium channel. You can consider these channels like gates. They can be opened with electricity. So when the electricity is higher than minus 55 millivolts, then this sodium channel can be opened. The sodium channel can only allow sodium to pass through. You have more sodium ions outside of the cell than inside. So the sodium goes from outside to inside of the cell. And because sodium ions carry positive charge, when they move from outside to inside, they increase the voltage inside the cell. When the voltage goes up to positive 30 millivolts, it will make the sodium channel inactivate. And it also opens the potassium channel. When the potassium channel is opened, you have more potassium ions inside than outside. So the potassium ions go from inside of the cell to outside of the cell and carries the positive charges outside to decrease the voltage inside of the cell. So the voltage goes down. When the voltage goes lower than minus 55 millivolts, it closes the sodium channel. But it does not close the potassium channel until it reaches minus 90 millivolts. At this point, the voltage is minus 90 millivolts, but the resting potential is supposed to be minus 70 millivolts. So our cell has to go back to minus 70 millivolts to be stable and functional. Fortunately, we have this sodium-potassium pump. It constantly moves 3 sodium ions out and 2 potassium ions in to keep your cell at minus 70 millivolts. This is called an action potential. And it starts at the moment when the sodium channel opens. When sodium channel opens, sodium ions go into the cell and increase the voltage inside of the cell. If the voltage is not enough to open the sodium channel, none of this can happen. Then you don't have action potential. So if the voltage is below minus 55 millivolts, we call this graded potential. And minus 55 millivolts is the voltage required to open the sodium channel to start action potential. So minus 55 millivolts is called the threshold for action potential. Let's summarize what we just learned. We have the resting potential at minus 70 millivolts. And the reason is that your sodium-potassium pump is always pumping 3 sodium ions out and 2 potassium ions in. So you have more positive charge outside of the cell than inside of the cell. When an electrical signal reaches to the cell, it increases the voltage. Before it reaches minus 55 millivolts, it is called the graded potential. Once it reaches minus 55 millivolts, it opens the sodium channel. When the sodium channel is opened, the sodium ions enter the cell because you have more sodium ions outside of the cell than inside of the cell. So the voltage inside of the cell increases. When it increases to about positive 30 millivolt, the sodium channel becomes inactive. So the sodium cannot move across the channel anymore. At the same time, the potassium channel opens. Since you have more potassium ions inside than outside of the cell, the potassium ions leave the cell and make the voltage go down. When the voltage goes down to about minus 55 millivolt, the sodium channel closes. But the voltage keeps going down because your potassium channel is still open until about minus 90 millivolt. Then your potassium channel closes. At minus 90 millivolt, both sodium and potassium channels are closed. Your sodium-potassium pump will pump the voltage back to minus 70 millivolt. That is the resting membrane potential. Let's clear everything and look at it again. Your resting potential is minus 70 millivolt. When it increases to minus 55 millivolt, the action potential starts because you open the sodium channel. So the minus 55 millivolt is the threshold for action potential. When it goes up to positive 30 millivolt, the voltage starts to go down because your sodium channel becomes inactive and potassium channel opens. It will go down to minus 90 millivolts, which is lower than the resting potential. Your sodium-potassium pump will pump the voltage back to minus 70 millivolt. Before the voltage reaches to minus 55 millivolt, which is the threshold for action potential, the action potential does not happen. So we call this graded potential. When the voltage is going up, we call it depolarization. Because your cell was originally polarized to be minus 70 millivolt, and now you are depolarizing it to be positive. When the voltage goes down, we call it repolarization, because now you are repolarizing it to minus 70 millivolts. But actually, the voltage goes down even further to minus 90 millivolt. So the actual decrease of the voltage is called hyperpolarization. The following slides just repeat what I just talked about, so you can take a look at them on your own.